Every spring, Americans spend close to $70 per household on plants that do not survive the season. Multiply that across millions of yards from Maine to California, and that is a staggering amount of money going straight into the compost pile year after year. And the worst part is, not one of those gardeners did anything wrong. They watered, they weeded, they followed the instructions on the little plastic tags stuck in the pot. And those plants still did not make it. That is not a gardening failure. That is a plant selection failure. And it has been happening to good people in this country for decades because nobody ever sat down and told them the truth about which plants actually survive real American weather, real American soil, and real American schedules. That truth starts right now. 13 perennials, all of them built to thrive in American conditions. All of them come back year after year without replanting, and not one of them will make you feel like you need a degree in horticulture to keep them alive. This channel covers exactly this kind of practical, no-nonsense gardening every single week. The gardeners already subscribed here have stopped wasting money on plants that fail every season. They know what works, what lasts, and what belongs in an American yard. Subscribe now and keep that knowledge coming directly to you every week without searching for it. Plant number 1 is Hostas, and if you have a shady corner in your yard that has defeated everything you've ever tried to grow there, this is the plant that ends that frustration permanently. Every American yard has that spot. Under the old oak tree, along the north side of the house where the sun never reaches, beside the foundation where it stays cool and dim from spring through fall. Most flowering plants take one look at those conditions and quit. Hostas move in and act like they own the place. These plants are grown primarily for their foliage, and that foliage is genuinely impressive. Enormous architectural leaves in deep forest green, blue-green, rich gold, and striking combinations of white and green that brighten dark spaces in a way that flowers rarely can. Some varieties stay as compact as 6 inches across and fit neatly between stepping stones. Others spread to 4 feet wide and become the undisputed centerpiece of an entire garden bed. Here is what most people get completely wrong about hostas. They assume shade-loving means fragile and fussy. Hostas are the opposite. Once they settle in, they are surprisingly drought-tolerant. They multiply on their own, and they return every spring larger and more impressive than the year before. No replanting, no coaxing, no special treatment. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, which covers the overwhelming majority of American gardens from Minnesota down through Georgia and out to the Pacific Northwest. If that shady corner has been an eyesore for years, hostas fix it permanently. Plant number 2 is Black-Eyed Susan, and this one is about as close to indestructible as a flowering plant gets. These are the bright yellow flowers with the bold, dark center that you have seen growing along roadsides, in meadows, and in front of farmhouses all across the country. There is a reason they show up everywhere without anyone planting them. They evolved here. Black-Eyed Susans are native to North America, which means this continent is already their natural home. They do not need your amended soil or your irrigation schedule or your fertilizer program. This land is already theirs. They bloom from midsummer all the way through hard frost, which gives you months of strong color during the hottest, driest stretch of the American growing season. They self-seed, meaning they spread on their own and produce more plants the following year without you lifting a finger. They draw butterflies and bees in serious numbers from the first bloom to the last. You can deadhead them to keep the flowers coming, or you can walk away entirely and let them handle themselves. Both approaches produce a beautiful result. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, exceptional across the Great Plains, the Mid-Atlantic, and throughout the South, where summer heat is relentless and most tender plants simply cannot hold up. Plant number 3 is Coneflower, known botanically as Echinacea. And if you are not already growing this one, you are missing out on something that works harder than almost anything else on this list. These tall daisy-like flowers come in purple, pink, white, orange, and yellow, and modern cultivars have expanded that range far beyond the classic purple that most people picture. They handle heat without complaint, they grow in poor soil without needing amendment, they tolerate drought in a way that would stress most other perennials into early dormancy. Here is the thing most gardeners do not know, and it genuinely changes how valuable this plant becomes. If you leave the seed heads standing in 4 instead of cutting everything back, songbirds feed on those seeds all through winter, goldfinches especially. On a cold January morning, a stand of coneflowers with birds working through the seed heads is one of the most alive-looking things a garden can offer when everything else has gone dormant and bare. Deadhead during the season for more blooms, or leave the whole plant alone and let it run its natural course. Either way, your garden looks intentional, full of life, and ecologically connected to the landscape around it. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, performs beautifully across the Midwest, the South, and everywhere in between that experiences genuine 4-season winters. Now here is something worth stopping on before going further into this list. Drop a comment right now and tell everyone watching where you are located and which of these first 3 plants you have already tried in your own yard. Because the gardening conditions in Georgia are nothing like the conditions in Minnesota, and hearing what actually works in your specific region helps every single person watching this video. 3 plants in, and not one of them has asked anything complicated from you. That pattern holds for every plant remaining on this list. Plant number 4 is Daylilies, and this one has been earning its place in American gardens for generations. Not because it is trendy, because it flat out works in almost every condition this country throws at it. The variety available in Daylilies is genuinely staggering. Over 80,000 registered cultivars exist today. Hot orange, soft creamy yellow, deep burgundy, rich red, delicate pink, and striking bicolors that combine 2 shades in a single bloom. There is a daylily for every taste, every style, and every region of this country. If someone tells you daylilies are old-fashioned, they have not seen what modern breeders have done with this plant in the last 20 years. Here is what makes them perfect for the gardener who does not want a full-time yard maintenance schedule. They grow in dense clumps that naturally crowd out weeds without any help from you. They tolerate clay soil, sandy soil, slopes, flat beds, and partial shade without complaining once. They multiply slowly on their own, and every 4 to 5 years you divide those clumps and get free plants for other areas of the yard. That is the complete maintenance list. Division every few years. That is genuinely it. One thing that must be said clearly, and this matters if you have outdoor cats, daylilies are toxic to cats specifically, not dogs, not other animals, cats only. Plant them with that in mind and position them accordingly in the yard. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, with newer varieties pushing into zone 10, particularly reliable across the southeast, the southwest, and anywhere summers run long and hot. Now before plant 5, this channel earns your subscription every single week with information exactly like what has already been covered in this video alone. Real plants, real zones, real American conditions. If that subscribe button is still untouched, there is no good reason for that. Tap it now, and every video going forward comes straight to you. Plant number 5 is lavender, and if you have killed it before, there is almost a guarantee of what went wrong. Most people kill lavender by being too good to it. Too much water, too rich a soil, too much fertilizer, too much attention paid to a plant that was specifically built to be left alone. Lavender evolved in the dry, rocky hillsides of the Mediterranean. It does not want your best garden bed. It wants your worst. Poor, lean, gritty, well-draining ground is exactly where it performs at its absolute finest. The blooms come in those iconic purple spikes that most Americans recognize immediately, and they are fragrant in a way that genuinely improves the experience of being outside near them. Plant lavender near a patio, a seating area, or along a front walkway, and it quietly repels mosquitoes through the growing season without a single spray can involved. The dried flowers are useful in cooking, in sachets tucked into dresser drawers, and in teas that have been made from this plant for centuries. In mild climates, lavender stays evergreen through winter, holding structure and color in the garden during months when most other plants have disappeared entirely. And in the coldest months, where it does die back, it returns in spring without being asked. English lavender, specifically Lavandula angustifolia, is the hardiest variety and handles Zone 5 winters reliably with proper drainage in place. Zone 4 gardeners are better served growing in containers that come inside before the first hard freeze arrives. Hardy in zones 5 through 9 for most common varieties. Thrives across the mid-Atlantic, the South, the Pacific coast, and the drier regions of the West, where hot summers and lean soil are simply part of the landscape. Plant number 6 is Sedum, also called stonecrop. And this is the plant that genuinely cannot be killed by neglect. Most people think succulents belong indoors in a pot on a windowsill. Sedum is a cold-hardy outdoor succulent that survives Zone 3 winters and Zone 9 summers without a single accommodation from the gardener. It stores water in its own thick, fleshy leaves, which means it is essentially carrying its own supply through drought, heat, and weeks of zero rainfall. Rocky soil is fine. Sandy soil is fine. The hot, dry hell strip between the sidewalk and the street that bakes in full sun all day is, for Sedum, a perfectly comfortable home. Sedum comes in 2 distinct forms. Low-growing creeping varieties spread beautifully along rock walls, between stepping stones, and across slopes where erosion is a constant problem. Taller, upright varieties, and the most well-known of these is Autumn Joy, grow 18 to 24 inches tall and produce large, flat flower heads that put on one of the most theatrical, seasonal performances of any plant on this entire list. Autumn Joy opens with pale pink buds in late summer. Those deepen to a rich rose as the plant reaches its peak. By fall, the color transitions to a warm rust bronze that holds its structure well into winter, standing firm through cold and wind when everything around it has gone flat and bare. 4 distinct looks from one plant across one growing season, hardy in zones 3 through 9 for most varieties. Some low-growing creeping sedums are cold-hardy well into zone 2, exceptional across the high plains, the southwest, and anywhere summer drought is the dominant challenge facing the garden. Plant number 7 is perennial salvia, and if deer and rabbits have been the single most frustrating obstacle in your garden for years, this plant is about to change that situation permanently. Before going further, one distinction must be made clearly because this mistake costs gardeners money every single season. There are annual salvias and there are perennial salvias, and they follow completely different coex, are entirely different plants. The annual version finishes its season and does not return. The perennial version, specifically Salvia nemorosa, comes back every year and performs better as it matures. Ask for it by that name at the nursery and make sure what goes into the ground is the right one. Salvia nemorosa produces compact, upright plants covered in rich violet blue, purple, or pink flower spikes that bloom heavily in late spring and early summer. Cut the plant back after that first flush of blooms finishes, and it rebounds with a second full round of flowers in late summer. 2 complete bloom cycles from one pruning effort. That kind of return on minimal work is exactly what belongs in a low-maintenance American garden. Butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds work perennial salvia constantly from the first bloom to the last. Deer walk past it without interest. Rabbits leave it entirely alone. The aromatic oils in the foliage are what repel them, and those oils are present all season long, not just during bloom. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. Zone 4 gardeners benefit from a generous layer of mulch laid over the root zone before the hardest winter cold arrives. Right here, with 7 plants covered, is a good moment to pause on something real. Not one plant on this list so far has asked for a complicated maintenance routine, an expensive soil amendment program, or a weekend dedicated to yard work. A beautiful American garden does not require any of that. It requires the right plants in the right spots. That is the only formula that has ever actually worked. Drop a comment right now and tell everyone watching which of these 7 plants is already growing somewhere in your yard. And if none of them are, say that too, because that answer is just as useful to everyone watching as any other. Plant number 8 is Russian sage, and this one stops people in their tracks every single time it reaches full bloom. Before the name is even given, picture this. Tall, silver-white stems rising 4 to 5 feet in the air, covered in tiny lavender blue flowers, so dense they create a soft, misty haze across the entire plant. It moves in the breeze the way nothing else in a garden moves. It catches afternoon light along the stem edges and turns almost luminous in the late summer sun. Everything planted near it looks better by contrast. Roses look more romantic beside it. Dark foliage plants look more dramatic against it. Plain green shrubs look deliberately placed next to it. That plant is Russian sage, botanical name Perovskia, and both parts of that common name are misleading. It is not from Russia. It is not a true sage. What it is, without question, is one of the most visually stunning and genuinely self-sufficient perennials available to American gardeners across the entire country. Here is what most people get wrong about it. They plant it in rich, amended soil and wonder why it flops over and loses that clean, upright elegance. Russian sage performs better in poor to average soil than in anything heavily fertilized. It wants full sun, excellent drainage, and the kind of benign neglect that most busy gardeners naturally provide. Drought tolerant once established. Deer resistant. Wind tolerant. The less it gets interfered with, the more dramatic and architectural it becomes with every passing season. This is the plant that makes neighbors slow down in front of the yard and ask what it is. And the honest answer is that it is one of the easiest things growing in the entire garden. Hardy in zones 4 through 9. Exceptional in the hot, dry West, the Midwest, and across the Great Plains, where summer heat and low rainfall would stress most other flowering perennials into early decline. Zone 4 gardeners cut it back to about 6 inches from the ground in late fall, and it returns reliably every spring without fail. Plant number 9 is Catmint, and if a garden path, a driveway border, or a front bed edge has looked unfinished and flat for years, this is the plant that corrects that permanently. Catmint, known botanically as Nepeta, forms soft, relaxed mounds covered in clouds of small lavender blue flowers that bloom heavily in spring. The overall effect is exactly what garden designers charge significant money to achieve: a flowing, cottage-quality softness that makes hard edges disappear and makes a space look effortlessly put together. The difference is that Catmint produces that result on its own without any design consultation required. Cut it back by about 1/3 after the first flush of spring blooms finishes, and it rebounds with a full second round of flowers in late summer. 2 complete bloom cycles, 1 light pruning. That is the entire seasonal workload for this plant. It handles full sun and partial shade without complaint. It grows in poor soil without amendment. It is drought tolerant once the roots are established. Bees and butterflies cover it from the first open flower to the last one standing before frost. And yes, cats may roll in it enthusiastically when they find it. That is not a problem that needs solving. It is honestly one of the more entertaining things a garden offers. Hardy in zones 3 through 8. Particularly excellent across the Northeast, the Upper Midwest, and the Pacific Northwest, where cooler conditions naturally extend the bloom season well beyond what warmer climates allow. Now, this channel has covered 9 plants so far, and every single one of them grows back every year. handles real American conditions, and asks almost nothing from the person tending them. If that subscribe button has not been pressed yet, consider what 9 more weeks of this kind of information looks like coming directly to an inbox every single week without searching for it. That is what subscribing here actually means. Tap it now. Plant number 10 is Yarrow, and this one has been growing wild in American fields, roadsides, and meadows since long before anyone planted a formal garden bed. Yarrow started as a wildflower. That single fact tells the complete story of how tough and self-reliant this plant genuinely is. Flat-topped clusters of tiny flowers in red, yellow, pink, cream, and white sit above feathery fern-like foliage that has a soft, naturalistic quality unlike almost anything else in the perennial world. The overall look is relaxed, abundant, and deeply connected to the American landscape in a way that imported ornamental plants simply cannot replicate. Here is what most gardeners do not realize about Yarrow. Those cut flowers dry beautifully and hold their color for months indoors. A mason jar of dried yarrow on a kitchen table in January, cut from the garden the previous summer, is one of the most genuinely satisfying things a home garden can produce. It self-seeds and spreads gradually, filling bare ground between established plants without any intervention from the gardener. In heavily amended, fertile soil, it can spread more assertively than expected. Give it a leaner spot with average to poor soil, and it stays productive, well-behaved, and consistently beautiful throughout the growing season. Drought-tolerant, heat-tolerant, poor soil-tolerant, deadhead during the season for continuous blooms, or leave it entirely alone and let it run its natural course through summer and into fall. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, one of the most cold hardy plants on this entire list, and an outstanding choice across northern states where brutal winters eliminate most other perennial options before they ever get properly established. Plant number 11 is Coreopsis, also called tickseed, and for pure season-long color in a sunny garden bed, nothing on this list competes with what this plant delivers from late spring all the way through the first hard frost of fall. Bright, cheerful, button-like flowers in yellow, pink, orange, and bicolor combinations cover this plant for a longer continuous bloom period than almost any other perennial in American horticulture. Modern varieties have been developed specifically for extended bloom, and several of them genuinely do not stop flowering until frost shuts them down entirely. Here is the mistake that costs gardeners blooms every season. Over-fertilizing Coreopsis. Too much nitrogen pushes the plant into producing excess foliage at the direct expense of flower production. The stems get floppy, the flower count drops, and the whole plant loses the compact, tidy habit that makes it so useful in borders and beds. Lean soil and full sun is the combination that produces the nonstop color performance this plant is genuinely capable of delivering. Many modern varieties are self-cleaning, meaning spent flowers drop on their own without any deadheading required from the gardener. Mass plantings of Coreopsis in a sunny bed, left largely to their own devices, produce a river of color across the entire growing season with almost no intervention at all. Hardy in zones 3 through 9, exceptional across the South and Midwest, where summer heat is intense, prolonged, and genuinely punishing to plants that were not built for those conditions. Plant number 12 is Liriope, also called lily turf. And this one solves what is genuinely one of the most frustrating problems in the American yard. Every homeowner with a mature oak, maple, or pine in the yard knows that spot. The ground underneath it, where the roots have taken over completely. Compacted soil, deep shade, almost no available moisture because the tree claims everything first. Plants go in and fail, season after season, until eventually a layer of mulch goes down and that corner gets written off entirely as unplantable ground. Liriope does not acknowledge that problem. It moves into those conditions and performs without a single accommodation from the gardener. dark, strappy, arching leaves stay attractive from spring through late fall and provide genuine visual interest during months when most other plants have nothing left to offer. In late summer, spikes of small purple or white flowers emerge above the foliage, understated but genuinely charming against the dark leaf color. Once established, Liriope forms a dense mat that crowds out most weeds without any help, holds soil on slopes where erosion is a constant battle, and stays evergreen through winter in mild climates across the South and the Mid-Atlantic. It handles deep shade and full sun equally well. It tolerates drought, compacted soil, and root competition from large established trees without showing stress. For the spots that have defeated every other plant tried in them, Liriope is the answer that actually holds. Hardy in zones 5 through 10, particularly reliable across the southeast, the mid-Atlantic, and anywhere long hot summers are paired with difficult soil conditions that challenge less adaptable plants. Plant number 13 is Karl Foerster feather reed grass. And this one deserves to be the final plant on this list because it does something none of the others can claim. It is genuinely beautiful in every single month of the year. Every one. In late spring, clean, upright clumps push feathery green flower plumes 4 to 6 feet into the air. Those plumes catch morning light and move in the wind with a quiet, unhurried elegance that no flowering plant quite replicates. By midsummer, they mature to warm gold. By fall, the entire plant transitions to rich bronze that glows in the low-angle autumn light, the way almost nothing else in the garden does at that time of year. And then winter arrives, and Karl Foerster does not disappear. It stands. Through cold, through snow, through wind. On a clear January morning, when the rest of the garden is flat and bare and dormant, this grass holds its structure, moves in the breeze, and catches the light in a way that makes even a frozen yard feel alive. The sound of ornamental grass moving in winter wind is something that has to be experienced in a garden to be fully appreciated. Here is the part that makes it even more valuable. Most people avoid ornamental grasses because they assume they spread aggressively and take over surrounding beds. Karl Foerster grows in a clean, neat, upright clump that stays exactly where it was planted. No runners, no sprawling, no invasion of neighboring plants. It earns its space and respects every border around it. The complete annual maintenance task is one hard cutback in late winter before new growth begins. Cut the clump down to 4 to 6 inches from the ground. That is the entire yearly job description for a plant that earns its place in the garden across all 4 seasons. Hardy in zones 4 through 9, performs reliably from the coldest gardens in Minnesota and Maine down through the humid summer heat of the Mid-South without losing the structural elegance that makes it so valuable in the American landscape. 13 plants. Every one of them coming back year after year. Every one of them built for real American conditions across real American yards. Pull this list together by the problems each one solves, and a complete, low-maintenance garden plan takes shape immediately. For shady, difficult spots where most plants give up entirely. Hostas and Liriope. For hot, dry, relentlessly sunny beds. Black-eyed Susan, Sedum, Yarrow, Coreopsis, and Russian sage. For borders, edges, and ground cover that crowds out weeds season after season, Catmint and creeping phlox. For pollinators, fragrance, and genuine wildlife activity, Lavender, Coneflower, Perennial salvia, and Daylilies. For 4-season structure, movement, and the kind of visual drama that makes a garden look professionally considered, Russian sage and Karl Foerster feather reed grass. No green thumb required, no free weekend sacrifice to maintenance schedules, no expensive annual replanting cycle that drains the garden budget every single spring. What is required is choosing the right plants for the right spots and putting them in the ground before the season moves on. Picture a backyard on a July morning. Coffee in hand, salvia covered in bees, Russian sage catching the early light along its silver stems. Hostas holding that shady corner with authority. Karl Foerster moving slowly in a light breeze at the far edge of the bed. Not one of those plants needed more than a few combined hours of attention across the entire growing season to look exactly like that. Pick 3 plants from this list, just 3. Choose them based on the single biggest problem spot in the yard right now. Get to the local nursery this week and get them in the ground while the season still has time to work in your favor. You were never a bad gardener. You were just planting the wrong things. That changes right now. If this video gave you something real and useful today, the subscribe button is right there, and this kind of content comes out every single week. Tap it, turn the notification bell on, and never go searching for this information again. Now, here is the question worth answering in the comments before leaving. What is the single most frustrating spot in your yard? The one that has defeated every plant you have ever put in it? And which plant from this list of 13 are you putting there first? Drop both answers below. Every comment gets read, and the answers from gardeners in different regions across this country genuinely help everyone else watching figure out what belongs in their own yard.